My name is Joanne Farquharson. I'm the CEO of Foothold America. The majority of folks on this call are either CEOs, founders, managing directors, and I'm so thrilled to have a candid conversation for those of you who may be taking that step to the US. Before we get started, I'll repeat some of the things that were sent in an email and just the logistics. We have decided to set this as a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar. So although the participants have joined and you're currently muted, and thank you for everyone for turning off your cameras, we will allow our speakers to be sort of front and center and the focus. And then afterwards, we'll have some question and answer. And so I invite you to use your raise your hand tool. And that can be found if you go to the section of your Zoom tools that says reactions. And if you click there, you can raise your hand. I will unmute you, or according to the Zoom rules, I will ask you to unmute yourself. You can unmute and ask a question. If you prefer not to ask the question directly, please send your question in chat. And for now, please allow me to introduce our three speakers. I'm so thrilled because they have insight that I think you'll find very valuable. So first we have Ria Rehberg. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Veganuary, which is a nonprofit organization that encourages people worldwide to try vegan in January and beyond. And she's been an incredible advocate of the movement for many years. And she'll be bringing a perspective slightly different as a nonprofit organization. Following Ria, we'll have John Cofie, who is the founder and CEO of the Chesamel Group. And what I love about the Chesamel Group is that they have a variety of different offerings that seem to mesh well, but upon first glance, I wouldn't necessarily have put them together. So Chesamel provides marketing solutions, technology training, and talent consultancy, embedded sales and marketing teams. So it's I think a truly unique organization. So we'll look forward to hearing from John. And thirdly, we have Rob Johnson, who is the co-founder of Affinia Therapeutics. And he's much more than that. He's had numerous companies that he's founded and grown, and has worked from Europe, from the UK and the US several times. He is the chairman of our board, and so I'm so thrilled to have him with us. So I've asked our presenters to each tell us a little bit about their companies and also the journey that they made to the US, how it's been, some things that were unexpected. So I would like to invite Ria to share the information and her experience.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for this introduction, for the invitation to speak here in this lovely setup. So as John very well said, I'm speaking on behalf of Veganuary. We're a UK registered nonprofit that focuses on increasing the visibility and also the availability of plant-based foods in order to protect the planet, animals, and people's health. And then to that end, we run our yearly Veganuary challenge, which is inspiring millions of people to try a plant-based diet for the month of January. And we work with retailers, with restaurant chains, delivery, food service, etc., to increase their plant-based offerings. So it all goes back to 2014, when Veganuary was founded in the UK by Matthew Glover and Jane Land. And then it became somewhat of a global phenomenon in its first couple of years, with people from every country in the world, except 3 countries actually, taking part in our challenge. And then most of the work with retail, with the restaurant and food service, was only focused on the UK at first. So when I was hired to take over the operational side of the organization in 2019, we then decided to expand our presence to Germany, where I'm based, the US, and several Latin American countries for strategic reasons. And we knew at that point that there was an appetite, so to say, for our work in the US, and we had tested the market in the years before. So we did a lot of digital activity there, and I had good connections to donors and investors in that space who already supported us. But of course, we didn't really know whether our campaign was going to be successful there. And as a nonprofit, of course, funds are always very, very limited. So we didn't really want to go through the long process of incorporating a 501c3, which is a sort of a tax-exempt registered organization in the US before we could even really start doing any groundwork in the US. So we wanted to hire staff and we wanted to expand our presence in the US without a significant sort of time and financial investment to get started. So we decided to work with Foothold America, and we hired a director for our work in the US through them, and then later an additional staff member. And we basically trialed our approach on a US audience in 2019, 2020. So basically the process of me coming on board in April 2019, then the decision to expand to additional countries, and then hiring our first staff member in the US in August. So our US director took about 4 months, and we saw it as a bit of an experiment, I would say. And then after the first 6 months, our evaluation was pretty positive. So we'd gotten a significant media attention. We had the Washington Post, the New York Times, and Wall Street Journal, and others speaking about our work. And we had about 60,000 people who were signing up with us to take the Veganuary challenge in the US. So this was definitely smashing our objectives and our expectations. And we also do quite a lot of fundraising in the US. So we have about 70% of our sort of entire global income coming from the US by now. And then another benefit for us having staff on the ground working on the campaign in the US for us is celebrity engagement, which is a pretty significant part of our work in order to raise awareness for our issues and our cause. And since the US, of course, is home to many high-profile celebrities that are known globally from, I don't know, Hollywood movies and things like that, our presence in the US has really allowed us to work with folks such as Joaquin Phoenix or Tabitha Brown or Alec Baldwin, and that has then had a very positive effect on our work and for our cause globally. So we'll send media releases about the work that we do in the US, in Germany, and in Latin America, and we get media attention for this work there as well. Therefore, we're able to multiply our impact in that sense. And then I also share a few things that have been, I guess, challenges for us in our expansion to the US. So similarly to other countries where we've started operating in around the same time. So firstly, of course, the different time zones from the US to the UK. And then this year we also took on board India. So it gets even more challenging to get sort of the entire international team together for regular meetings. It requires a lot of flexibility on times and things like that. And then there's, of course, cultural differences from country to country. Therefore, we had to do a lot of sort of test and miss with our messaging. We had to experiment a lot through social media advertising, lots of A/B testing and mailings, etc., to really improve our efficacy. And then, so one example, I suppose, is in the UK, the term vegan has now a pretty positive connotation. So people associate it with a healthy diet containing lots of like fruits and vegetables. But in the US, the term is very, I would say, more frowned upon. So there's a lot of misconceptions about this type of diet, and the term plant-based is much more sort of positively connotated. So we had to do lots of trials and tests around things like this. And then in terms of our staff members, so there's, of course, certain differences and expectations regarding working styles, notice periods, contracts, benefits, etc. So in the US, it seems to be that a notice period of about 2 weeks seems pretty standard, whereas in the UK, it's usually about 2 months, in Germany, about 3 months. So that, of course, in the US makes recruiting sort of fast and easier, but it can also have negative effects. And we try to adapt our contracts internationally, sort of not only to the legal framework and employment rights in the country we operate in, but we also try to take into account customs and expectations that go a little bit beyond the legal framework. So obviously this is an area to watch out for. And then I guess there's just a few very obvious things, such as having to adapt a lot of content that we produced in the UK before. And even though it was in English, we needed to adapt it to fit the different cultural context. We needed to adapt all of our recipes on the US version of the website to different measuring systems or changing spelling, and all of these things that maybe you don't take into account right away. And you have to all of a sudden adapt all of your resources. And then just another example where we had to push an international launch back because it would have conflicted with Thanksgiving as a US holiday. So now we need to take into account all the countries and states, regional holidays, specific festivities, etc., when it comes to planning our launch dates, meetings, retreats, etc. So I would say overall, we've been content with our first 2 years in the US, but of course not sort of being an established organization there also has disadvantages for us. So we're not able to receive tax-exempt donations, which is why we're considering registering sometime in the future. But for now, we're pretty content with our current setup. I'm very grateful we were able to start our activities in the US with really such short notice and with so little preparation, kind of testing the waters there. Yeah, happy to answer any additional questions later on, of course.
Ria, that is absolutely fantastic. I didn't realize that you were in so many countries. And the question that comes to my mind, even though we're focused on the US right now, is can you give us some insight in terms of how challenging it was to get started, and specifically around employees when it in the different countries when it comes to compliance, ease of getting things going? Can you share a little bit about that, how it's varied from country to country?
Yeah, absolutely. So Germany, I would say, is quite easy because I am based in Germany and I've been running a German NGO here before. So I knew the employment law and rights and had contacts here. So I think setting up the German office, so to say, has been probably the easiest task. Much more difficult has been Latin America, because we're now in Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. And of course, all three countries have different customs, different laws, etc. So we did work with a lot of freelancers in the beginning to kind of test the waters there as well. But yeah, that's definitely been the more challenging one. And now we're starting in India this year, also with 2 freelancers currently. So we'll see how that goes. And we need to set up more officially there.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. And I'm sure there will be some questions a little bit later and coming through on chat. So thank you, Ria. And we'll now move to
Oh dear, have we lost Joanne?
I think
we have. I may step in if you don't mind. I'm Rose Adenergy, Foothold America's US Expansion Advisor. We'll wait while Joanne comes on board. Just to continue conversations, Joanne was moving over to John to make introductions and a summary of Chesamel. So I'll hand over to you, John.
That's great. No, thanks, Rose, and thanks, Ria, for such a thorough explanation of what you do. Found it completely fascinating. I'm John. I'm the founder of Chesamel Group, and Chesamel Group is a UK-based, UK-incorporated management consultancy that specialises, as Joanne was saying, we've sort of managed to cobble together a few services that tend to work very well together, and they are marketing, digital transformation, and recruitment or talent management. So these integrated services we found back in 2008 were relevant to certain profiles of businesses, typically startups in the tech space that were experiencing hyper growth patches during their evolution, and some of those were based in the US, others were based in the UK. So we formalized our model during the period between 2008 and 2018 to focus on those 3 areas. So I'd like to add that we originally started off as a marketing agency. So the digital transformation or the digital training aspects of what we do, as well as the recruitment, were, I wouldn't say afterthoughts, but were natural shoots that emanated from starting off as a marketing agency. So our business is quite unique because obviously we're B2B. We're not a consumer focused organization. So our experiences about in relation to entering the US market have been quite challenging, quite fascinating. Just because it's a very highly competitive space, not least because most of the large consultancies, management consultancies, have strong footprints already in the US. But in 2018, I think it was probably 2017, we made the decision to enter the US market because one of our clients, our larger clients, was based there, although they had a presence, strong presence in Europe as well. Now, I suppose the story is quite lengthy, but I'll try and cut it down as best I can in terms of the due diligence and the research that went into our decision to actually enter the US market. I must say I was faced with a lot of concerns, purely because we were a small business ourselves working with large clients, but with competitors that were of a similar size of our clients. So I felt that we were probably shoving water up a hill a little bit, in terms of our ambitions, but we went for it. But that process involved a number of accountants, a number of lawyers, a number of partner companies that we felt we could actually launch our business through in the US, all sort of sitting down around the table to discuss what the best market entry strategy should be. And I must say, after the first few meetings, we felt no, not right for us. Perhaps if we were a product-based company, it might be interesting to do something in the US, but we then retreated. And then I started sort of researching organizations that acted as employers of record. I've never heard of it. I didn't think anything existed like that. To my knowledge at the time, I knew that we could actually enter the market with an accountancy partner, potentially, with a law firm acting as a partner. But then I didn't think that a service existed that enabled us to hire all types of different workers, freelancers, full-timers, sort of contingency workforces, to deliver on projects, just because our business is very time sensitive and is very, very sort of project based. So coming across Foothold was pretty, I would say, life changing in terms of our business. Prior to that, our US exposure was nil. 0% of our revenue was generated from the US market. Since we then rolled all of our people and human resource needs into a partner like Foothold, I think we've seen our revenue increase from 0% to 30% from the US market, and that's been fairly steady since we took the leap. But I think what's interesting for us also is that we still had ambitions about opening up our own offices. We still felt that having a physical address and having a presence would be important. So we have incorporated our business in the US, but we are sort of running that in conjunction with our relationship with Foothold, which is, again, I think it's a fantastic way of working, because it enables us to take our time to then transition if we need to. But for now, I think our current sort of setup works really well for us. I just really wanted to touch on some of the other markets that we're in and how easy or not it was to enter them. So we're present in the Nordics, and also we're launching in Singapore later this year. And because we do three fundamental things, growing talent pools for specific projects, marketing, consultancy, and also digital transformation, it's interesting to note that the US market really is very responsive to 2 out of 3 services, and that's the marketing consultancy piece and the talent services. So which I don't know what we can take from that, but I think that most of our client in the US is interested in our approach to scaling teams rapidly and taking that headache off their table, so that they can focus on project delivery. So that I just wanted to highlight that's the service that's gaining the most traction. And 30% of that revenue from the US is driven by a mixture of the talent and the marketing services. We look at the Nordics region. Yes, there were complexities. I must say that it was perhaps we had the confidence to enter the Nordics region because we had tackled the US market as far as I was concerned. So we sort of approached that with a wind behind, wind in our sails a little bit. So that was really positive. And APAC also, we're taking lessons from that US market entry into the APAC region. At least we're approaching it with more knowledge, if you like, as to what the considerations should be. So just culturally, one thing I just really wanted to highlight, and I'm sure this may come up in our conversations later, is that I just felt that the US market was very litigious, in its sort of culture when it came to adversarial, when it came to business. So again, one of the hesitant forces behind our decision making was that what I've found is that once you partner with the right stakeholders and you're aware of all the different compliance considerations which are state-led, I feel that it's probably the best thing any company that has ambitions for growth can do. And lastly, I'll say that I'm not physically in the US. I was just literally going to do that in 2020, and we had plans in 2019 for me to relocate there for at least 6 months. Obviously, for obvious reasons, that wasn't possible. But we do have a workforce that's growing, and so we are going to be committing to the US market, at least in person, over the next couple of months, and we'll have a member of our team present to grow our business.
Thank you, John. That's fantastic. Please pardon my disappearance. We had Rose at the ready, so thank you, Rose. So, John, you've brought up something that we haven't talked about yet, which is immigration and going back and forth. And even for a 6-month period, you would need to have a visa of one sort or another. And of course, 2020 was a challenge. But can you speak to the part of your decision-making process that led you to want to send someone or yourself to the U.S. on a more permanent basis? What are you hoping to achieve by that?
So that's a great question, and I'm sure that person is actually watching this, and she wouldn't mind me saying this. But it was a combination of things. It was there was a change in personal circumstances for this particular person, which meant that she would be a lot more invested in the US. But at the same time, we also, and quite coincidentally, we were also thinking about who on our team would be best placed to relocate. So I think the two scenarios kind of intersected at a very opportunistic time. So that's what expedited our decision. And so what was going to happen, what the plan was that was going to take place next year. I mean, next year was when I was going to do that, but it looks like we'll be able to have that in place by the end of October, which is fantastic. So yes, there's a combination of personal circumstances, which meant that, Harriet, I will be spending a lot more time in the US, and we can then focus on our growth. So I think it's been it hasn't been as complex a decision to make as the original decision to enter the US market, but I'm sure future roles may be or may not be. We may end up recruiting locally, which I think might end up being the case.
That's great. Thank you, John. I have one more question before we go to Rob. And I realize that the answer to this question varies for organization to organization, but do you have in your mind, so you explained how you wanted to just step into the market without having had any revenue from the US. Now, as you've had some experience under your belt, do you see or has your vision for the US expansion changed over time?
I think that's a really good question. It has changed possibly over time, in that I feel that we are more confident in the services we're offering in that market. I know I haven't really stressed a lot on the nuances of those three pillars, but you know, we've got our major presence in the West Coast, and so our client has a presence, or our clients have a presence in San Francisco and the surrounding regions. So access to talent is fundamentally important for the tech space, and this is a tech obviously client, and that tech client is growing, as do all companies that are ambitious enough to have a presence in that part of the world. So yes, I think we're certainly more confident as a result of the move to the US, and that vision is strengthening, I think. Every time we revisit it, every time we have a planning session, it's more a case of when and not how, and I think that really is shaping our thinking at the moment.
That's excellent. Thank you. And I think your mention of the word confidence is a big part of it. And that is one of the reasons we wanted to bring you all together, because just hearing about your experiences, and I have to say there haven't been too many nightmares. Maybe you're only sharing the good, but I think that will help our attendees think, hey, maybe I can do this too. So yeah. I'd like to turn the stage over to Rob Johnson, and he and I have been working together for 4 years. He's an absolute delight. So I thought I'd just say that and make sure he blushes just a little bit before he starts to speak. But Rob, will you please share your varied experiences in U.S. expansion?
Sure, it'd be a great pleasure, and thank you to the whole team for arranging the webinar and everyone for coming to listen. I'll be fairly brief because I'm sure there are some questions from from everyone who's joined. But my journey is a little bit different. I co-founded a consulting firm which specialized in providing strategy consulting services to the biotech and pharmaceutical industry. This was back in 2019. And at the time, we're just coming out of the credit crunch, and certainly funding for the whole industry is very dependent on venture capital. And the amount of venture capital in the UK had significantly dried up. Whereas in Boston, especially, and in the US generally, there were still a lot of companies each month announcing they'd closed a $20, $30, $40 million Series A, which at the time was a large Series A. These are the companies that we help, relatively early stage biotech companies working on new science. And so it became just really important to us as we thought about building our company that we needed to have a presence in Boston to be close to the clients. And I decided to, sorry, it started in 2009, not 2019, John, thank you. Yeah, it was 12 years ago. So back in 2012, I moved over with my family to the US and started building the business. That journey was very hard, working out how do we do this. We spoke to a ton of professional advisors, and I'll just give you one anecdote. We were introduced to a New York-based accountant who apparently had experience of helping UK companies navigate their way to setting up a US entity and a presence. And we decided, we had an introductory call with a partner at the firm. We decided not to progress with them. And when we told her we weren't going ahead with her firm and we hadn't signed an engagement letter or anything, we were quite surprised the following week to receive an invoice from her for $1,000 an hour. So we're quite surprised at that sort of approach, and I think it speaks to we really felt that there was a sort of almost a predatory feeling of, you know, this naive British company asking naive questions to cutthroat US professional advisors. But gradually we sort of pieced together the way, and it took us about a year to get a visa for me and to get everything sorted out to land in the US. And it was a tremendous success. The firm did very well. And another anecdote, just to counterbalance the one I mentioned, is just the great pleasure of doing business with US companies. So we would write a proposal for setting out how we'd approach a piece of work for X number of dollars. And the client would come back and say, wow, you can do this for X dollars? What can you do for 2X or 3X? And the amount of money money was not an issue. You know, they had plenty of money. The issue was solving the problem that they were facing and getting value for that service. So the whole mindset was very, very different to UK clients. It was that opportunity translated into, you know, fantastic growth for the US side of the business. I did step down from that company in 2019 to co-found a biotech company, and that's a venture capital funded company with US investors, and currently now has about 60-70 employees in the Boston area. And I've since relocated back to the UK, but happy to share any additional experiences or answer any questions if anybody would like to pose them.
Rob, thank you very much. And I see we've got a little over 10 minutes remaining. So I would like to open the floor to anyone who would like to turn on your camera. And if you would raise your hand or send a question through chat, we will bombard our presenters with some questions. And one question has come in, and it's for John. John, can you describe the value, your due diligence process before entering the U.S. market, and would you have done anything differently?
Sure, and thanks for that. Thanks for that question. I'd like to answer that question by picking up on just something that Rob mentioned about the the $1,000 an hour bill that was sent across. I think we had similar experiences, although I don't think we got that far with an invoice. I think that certainly would have been a nail in the coffin. But the due diligence we did was quite thorough. I think that we had 6 separate meetings with two accountants. That was because, of course, like any company would be mindful of the exorbitant costs that may creep up when entering the US market, both on the setup side of things with the accountants, obviously lawyers, but also staffing costs, with all the the benefits and the obligatory sort of insurance packages that need to be sort of considered for staff. So we that due diligence was very, very thorough. And thankfully we had a consultant who was who gave us all the options per state, in relation to where we should incorporate and how to file and all of that work. From a legal standpoint, I felt that it was fairly straightforward because that conversation was more about the type of entity that we should incorporate, and obviously this differed state to state in relation to the pros and the cons. So not as many meetings with lawyers, but it was very very concise, very thorough as to what the options were. But I will add that even after all those meetings, which are now we've acted on some of that, we are yet to act on others because of our relationship with our partner Foothold. I feel that it's even if you do decide to go with an employer of record, it'll be great to have an understanding of what the different regulations are across the length and breadth of the US even before entering that partnership with the employer of record.
Great, thank you so much. I've got one more chat question, and then Chris Buckingham will go to you for your question. Thank you for raising your hand. So this question is to any of the panelists. This person is looking for your thoughts on initially working with consultants versus immediately hiring. The beachhead functions we need are things like sales and marketing, skills that established local agencies offer at a high quality. Is it necessary to hire full-time employees, or can the business establish itself in a more outsourced format? So any one of the three of you, please jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide my perspective. I think it's definitely worth considering working with consultants and established agencies, especially if they can provide a high quality service. There are laws around independent contractors you need to be aware of. So hiring a solo practitioner, a freelancer in the US, there are R35 rules about employee status, and you may have been reading about it with Uber drivers, for example. And it's similar to the UK legislation, but led upon that, there are also state-specific laws, and they can be stricter than the federal laws. So Massachusetts and California in particular have got really quite stringent laws around hiring independent contractors on a consultancy basis. If it's a established consulting firm, then that becomes much easier. But yeah, for sure, it's well worth considering working on a contractual basis first. We felt that building an internal capability was strategically important for us, for example, around marketing. So we did engage with some marketing agencies, but frankly, the quality of work wasn't the level we were looking for. And having people who are working full-time for us and were 100% focused on our business proved to be much more effective for us.
Thanks, Rob. Ria, would you like to respond? And John, also, John, it makes sense, I think, for your company, but Ria, please, do you have something you'd like to add?
Sure, yeah, I think our experience has been very similar to Rob. So in terms of marketing, we've almost done everything in-house. And when we did look at outsourcing or working with agencies, it did seem quite expensive compared to what we were able to do in-house and just replicate what we've been doing in the UK before. But we have worked with a PR contractor, which was amazing. So we did it on an hourly basis for several months during the campaign. And it's been really useful because obviously that person had all the media contacts in the US, which is something that takes time to build up for someone you're just hiring if they don't necessarily have that experience. So that's proven really efficient for us as well.
John, before we go to the participant who has their hand raised, do you want to add some information to that?
Yes, just very quickly, just to agree with Rob and Ria. I mean, our organization, actually, we happen to be one of those organizations that other businesses outsource certain functions to because of our embedded model. So without being biased, of course, I would like to say that, yes, where possible, if there's a trusted relationship that covers the services or the areas of your business that it can be delivered through a partner such as ourselves or a management consultancy, that's probably a softer landing initially, and then of course that should enable you to then take some learnings and then build your own internal capabilities.
Excellent, thank you. Chris, I'll invite you to share your camera if you'd like to, and to ask your question. I mentioned early on that there was someone joining us from the US who might be tired, so kudos to you for waking up for this. So please ask your question, and then we'll have some more from the chat. Thank you.
Great. Hi, good morning, everybody. This is a question for Rob, I think. I'm a occupational therapist and a specialist in posture management and wheelchairs. And we won an Innovate UK award in 2019 to develop a transfer board for wheelchair users to help them move from surfaces. And that's gone into production, and we're about to start importing that into the US. It's been made in the UK. So we came over here as a family last year because we didn't understand the US healthcare market. And in particularly, what we're trying to look at and try and understand is how people find out what equipment they need. Because in UK, if I have a patient who needs a range of 5 pieces of equipment, we issue the equipment to them. Whereas here in the US, it's not clear how people even know how they can access equipment. And I just wonder, because you're in the sort of biotech industry, is there any advice you would give us as to how we can start to identify who our customers are and how they purchase and what their purchasing habits are?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. I mean, one of the challenges of the US is just how fragmented a market is. I mean, you think of the US as being this beautiful, homogenous sort of market, but certainly in healthcare, it's so much more fragmented.
Yeah.
You remind me of actually a previous Foothold America client that was making equipment to help paramedics move heavy people around, and the US approach was just to take a load more paramedics to lift people down the stairs and into the ambulance. But what I could do, it's a very specialist area, so what I could do is reach out to that company and see if they'd be open to sharing their experience with you.
That would be great. That would be perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, very happy to.
I think it's just by getting opinions from other people who've actually done it that makes all the difference, really.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Rob, for your generous offer of help. I have another question through chat. I just want to let folks know we are approaching the time for the end of our program, but for anyone who wants to stay on, if they can, and want to ask more questions, we'll continue as long as the panelists can stay, and otherwise we'll follow up via email to answer your questions. This chat question, hi, what are the panelists' thoughts on having point people in the US? For example, frontline sales team, and then servicing the contracts with a UK-based operational team? Or do US companies feel more comfortable having the team fully based in the US? So having account managers who have the right accent and the right cultural references, etc. Does anyone want to comment on that?
I'm very happy to take a stab, yeah. So first of all, Americans obviously love the English accent, so the right accent is an interesting perspective. I think certainly at Alacrity Consulting, we benefited from having a representative or representatives in the US and having the work actually done in the UK. UK salaries are a lot lower, so the cost of actually producing the work was a lot lower. And it was a fantastic way of working. I do think one of the advantages of having account managers and client-facing contacts, customer-facing contacts in the US is the ability to tap into a lifetime's worth of relationships. So if you hire the right person in the US, and they may well have gone to graduate school or business school with a lot of people who are your prospective clients, and they're very, very strong bonds and relationships, so you can immediately establish that level of trust, which is very valuable for developing new business.
Yes, I'd be happy to jump in there as well. So I'm a huge proponent of hiring local people to actually make decisions on a certain country context, just because of as you said, the connections they have and the cultural background and the understanding of their country. So whenever we have expanded to another country, we've made sure that we always had a director there that is based in that country that's making all the important decisions. But then in terms of operational structure, so we run all of that in the UK and we support our country teams from there. So I would say anything that requires real decision making and knowledge of a country should be done by people that are part of that country and part of their culture. But then there can be other things that can be outsourced, of course, at least for our case.
And I would also agree with Ria that yeah, in our business we the operations or global operations tends to sit in the UK. However, the delivery of the services often has to be localized. So yeah, and given our agile business model and also for cultural reasons, strongly recommend having a locally hired team as soon as possible.
That's great. Thank you all very much. There is just one more question for Ria. We are a few minutes over time, so we'll go ahead and ask and answer this question. And then I invite all of the participants who have questions either now or pop into your mind later to send those to me by email. But Ria, the question for you is the way you market your services offering different in the US to other countries? So I know you mentioned, language differences and things like that, but in terms of the distribution channels you use, has that been different for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually hasn't. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't have done it. Maybe we just haven't tested enough because we're such a small charity. So we're using the same channels, and most of them are digital. We've been doing some TV advertisement and some cinema advertising and some billboards and things like that that are sort of more offline, but we've trialed these in several different countries, and we usually try to do it in countries that are a little bit cheaper than the US. So we do a lot more of offline in Latin America, for example, and do a lot more digital marketing in the US. So I would say we've basically done and trialed the same strategies, and unfortunately I can't really comment on anything that works particularly well in the US. It just tends to be very similar in all the countries we're in.
Thank you. And John, do you have anything to add, considering you're in so many countries?
Certainly when it comes to marketing, we haven't done a great deal in the US to promote our services. It's one of the things that we're planning to do, certainly in the coming months and into next year. But our chosen sort of channel will be predominantly digital. I feel just because of the nature of what we do, professional services typically, and yes, and certainly across different markets. We haven't participated in any sort of above the line activity as yet. So I think some of the wonderful things about digital and digital transformation broadly is that there are many different channels within the digital realm that can be harnessed to promote your business. So for us, yeah, it's not a great deal, but what the little we're doing by way of digital marketing is proven to be effective.
Excellent. And I see that some of our participants are dropping off, and yet we still have quite a few. If our presenters are willing to stay a few more minutes, another question has come in, and it is, oopsie. Two questions. Hold on. What has been a key strategy for engaging clients on the ground during the pandemic? And are in-person events coming back for a big win for companies starting their presence? So face-to-face, how's that going for all of you?
Well, so for us, it's still hard, I'd say. There's still some reticence for good old-fashioned big face-to-face events, but I think I'll just share some of our experience. When we launched in the US, we were very fortunate to be able to collaborate with the British consulate in Boston, and they agreed to let us use a fabulous room at the Consul General's residence in Beacon Hill, which is sort of the most prestigious area you can live in Boston. And this fantastic sort of red brick, I was going to say mansion, but it sounds a bit grand. But and we had in their private dining room there, we had a whiskey tasting event followed by dinner, and it went down an absolute storm. With we invited CEOs from local biotech companies, and it was incredibly well received, and it was just a lovely event. So if you can arrange an event, and I know one of our other advisors, Judith, has got a lot of experience of doing similar things for her business in New York. but it can be a really effective way to raise the profile of the company and start to build those relationships.
Absolutely. If I can quickly jump in there, with what Rob said, yes, I think merging experiences with, in-person sort of events or meetings is a wonderful combination. We actually worked with London and Partners as well. This is one thing I missed to mention earlier on, and they typically put on events globally and have sort of trade missions, into the US and other parts of the world. So yes, looking at London and Partners as well, if your business is looking to enter different markets, would be a good thing.
Great, thank you so much. There is a question. I can see this being a good question for you, Ria, given the various types of marketing you've done. What advice can you give on selecting a suitable PR company for our relatively small business? Is the cost of PR eye-watering?
Yeah, great question. So our experience has been that, well, we've been very lucky both in the US, but also in Germany and Latin America, actually working with contractors who have a lot of experience in this regard rather than with bigger agencies. Because yes, those proposals can be quite expensive, but working with someone who does have the relationships to the different media and ideally really cares about your business or your products, I think can be something that works really well. Of course, it's a little bit more of a risk, but it's worked incredibly well for us so far. And it's been, yeah, I think quite cost competitive compared to bigger agencies.
Great, thanks so much. Another question has come in. And I'm going to say to the question asker, this is something Foothold America can help you with. So we'll go ahead and pose this somewhat legal question to our presenters and invite you to speak with Rosa Dedegi, our US expansion advisor, after. The question is, if a UK company employed a US citizen in the USA to carry out work on their behalf as consultant, could the contract be under English or Welsh law? Any of our presenters care to give that a go?
Well, I'd be hesitant about providing legal advice, but certainly my understanding is that engaging a consultant under a consulting agreement is no problem to have it under English and Welsh law.
Yes, we've had similar structures in the past where we had a US citizen working out of Miami on a project that we owned, and that project was assigned on the basis of an international organization hiring a consultant based in the US territory. So it was under sort of English and Welsh law.
That's great. Thank you so much. We have what I'll call the last question that has come in. And again, thank you for those of you who have stayed past the 45 minutes. The question is, we are looking to put our first person on the ground in Boston early next year, going from the UK. Can people advise the first steps regarding visa?
My advice would be to find a very good immigration attorney to help. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
I might be frozen.
No, we can hear you, Joanne. Yeah, so my advice would be to speak to several attorneys, specialist immigration attorneys, and engage one of them. And I know the team at Foothold America can help with that.
Certainly, Rob, thank you. And Jamie certainly will reach out to you should you need support. Immigration, the doors are opening and it's going to get a little bit easier, but lots of backlogs at the moment, a lot of hoops to go through. So more than happy to chat and share some wealth of knowledge to you as well. I think Joanne is still frozen, so apologies. I think we'll start to conclude this session. First of all, I would really like to say and appreciate a big thank you to Ria, John, and Rob for attending and sharing your wealth of information and your learning experiences. I fully respect those who are making that brave move into America and creating that foothold. But we're here to support if you require. Any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Joanne and myself. But I thank you all for attending. I hope it was very valuable to you. And Joanne, as you come back, I may leave you to just give you the final word there.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Rose. Yeah, internet in rural France sometimes can be troublesome. Again, all I can say is thank you to our presenters and to our attendees for sharing your time together and your expertise. I encourage you to ask any other questions. And again, thank you so very much. And best of luck to all of those considering the US expansion. So in a word from an American, go for it.